Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Scares That Shaped Us, a podcast about horror writers and the stories that made them. I'm your host, Matthew Jackson, and today we are joined by one of horror's fastest rising stars. She is the author of books like Blood on Her Tongue, My Darling Dreadful Thing, and her latest, which is called Bone of My Bone. It is available everywhere you get your books right now. Johanna van Veen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's so great to talk to you. I am a big fan. I feel like you and I, to use a term the kids like, I feel like we match each other's freak. I uh, I read your books and I'm like, yes, someone who gets it. And Bone of My Bone was another amazing entry in that. In that it is folk horror, it is religious horror, it is horror dealing with Germanic folklore, it is historical horror, it is all of the things I love crammed into one book. But in case anyone out there listening doesn't know about this book yet, would you mind offering our listeners just a little taste of what Bone of My Bone is, what they can expect from it?
Yeah, of course. So, Bone of My Bone is set in Bavaria during the 30 Years' War, so that's early modern times. And we're basically following three POV characters. One of them is a nun, Sister Ursula. She has fled her convent after it's basically been attacked by soldiers. So she's on the road. She's attacked by more soldiers, and she is saved by this peasant girl, Elsbeth. And Elsbeth is also on the road because almost her entire family has passed away either due to sickness, starvation, or more violence related to the war. So she's on her way to try and find her last remaining relative. So the two of them flee into the forest, away from these soldiers. And as they're basically there, they stumble upon a dying man, and this man has with him a relic, a skull. And he tells these women, like, hey, so I found this skull, and this belongs to a saint, and she very much would like her head to be reunited with her body. In fact, if you do this for her, she will grant you a wish. And he gives them the skull, gives them a map to basically tell them where the body is, and promptly passes away. So now, Sister Ursula and Elsbeth is a Protestant, by the way, that is relevant to the story, decide to go on this quest to reunite the skull because they both have very like strong wishes and desires. At the same time, there's a necromancer who is also after the skull, and that's where we get our third POV character, namely Otto, who is a mercenary, a soldier, who crosses paths with the necromancer and then is forced to serve him.
Yeah, if longtime listeners of the show, if you're hearing Johanna describe that, you know exactly why I'm so into it. It's got so many things that I love. And you mentioned Elspeth being a Protestant and Ursula, obviously a Catholic, a nun, which is very relevant to the 30 Years' War and very relevant to your book. There's just so much material to go through and there's so many layers to this, and I ask this question a lot, but I always like hearing the answer from every author I talk to. What part of this story jumped out at you first and made you feel like you had to start writing it?
I think mainly the Saint Skull. Catholics just love a good corpse.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they really do. They have all these corpse relics, and I find that very interesting because I think if we look at the way American society, but also Western European society now deals with death, it's very distant. It's almost a taboo topic, I would say, in the US even more so than in the Netherlands. I know, for example, that in the US it's very uncommon to keep a deceased loved one at home until you actually get to the point where you're ready to like cremate or bury. In the Netherlands, that is an option. But yeah, I mean, I think your average person doesn't really see a dead body until they're a bit older. It's not something you encounter a lot. It's also not something I think a lot of people are like traumatized by the first time they saw a dead body. It's a very scary experience for most of us. Um, but I would say not in the not too distant past, people were surrounded by death, not only because it just was a lot more common for people to pass away at a young age, but they also had a different relationship to death, also to corpses specifically. And that's something I still find very fascinating about Catholicism, where we have all these relics, all these body parts basically being venerated. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to write a story sort of incorporating that. I think all my horror is about corpses one way or another and the weird relationship we have with them. But I wanted to do something a bit more like set in early modern times rather than more modern times. My previous books were set in the 1950s and the 1880s, and I wanted to go back in time a little bit. And so I wanted to do something with this like Catholic veneration of body parts.
Yeah, I we could talk all day about relics of saints. It is growing up. My family is half Catholic, so that side of religious culture was always present in my family. What's funny is my mother grew up in a German Catholic household, so they were very Catholic. She went to Catholic school as a young girl, and I didn't find out about relics from my Catholic relatives. I found out about relics independently, probably from the History Channel or something, because it's become it's this very interesting thing that the relics are venerated and obviously viewed as extremely important to Catholics, and yet people don't even like to talk about them necessarily. At least in my experience here in America, people are just very like, I don't want to talk about bones and you mentioned bodies staying at home before burial, and that was a thing that my grandmother remembered happening. She would tell me stories of sitting up with the dead, they called it in the American South, and it was just a part of. But she always talked about it in these hushed tones of like, that's not a thing we do anymore. So I love that aspect of the book. I also love the setting. I love the 30 Years War. Uh, that sounds so weird to say. I love the 30 Years War. It was so fun.
Great
No,
War, yeah.
it was awful. But your portrayal of it is so darkly beautiful. What is your research process like when you decide to tackle a historical period like this?
So what helps is that I do have a master's degree in English literature with a specialization in early modern times, and I have one in book and digital media, and again with like early modern book history. So if you have a degree in that, even if it's like a specific topic, obviously there's a lot of reading you do outside of that. So that definitely helped because it's really hard to write a book about something you don't know anything about. In fact, like how
Mm-hmm.
would you even get the idea to write anything set during the 30 Years' War if you don't know anything about the 30 Years' War, right? So I did have an idea about the 30 Years' War. I do have to say I didn't know like the very specifics, apart from the fact that it was like largely motivated by religion. So I did have to read a lot about that. There are very good books available in Dutch, English, and German. So that definitely helps, I would say, if you're able to speak. Like there's a lot available in English as well, but definitely also like German. So that really helps because I can read German just fine. So what I had to do is like I had to read a lot. So general stuff about the 30 Years' War, like why are we even fighting? What happens exactly during these 30 years? And then a lot more specifically, what was this like for normal people, like your common peasant, your sister in the convent? And also I had to narrow it down to a specific region, obviously. And I chose Bavaria because there was a lot of information about that. Plus you have the Bavarian forest, and I thought that was a very, very creepy location, or at least very interesting because it's basically, if you think about it, like Bone of My Bone is sort of a weird road trip novel about a
Yeah, yeah,
car.
yeah.
So they had to travel somewhere, and I figured it'd be scary if we plunked them in a forest.
This actually leads me to the next thing I wanted to ask you about. This novel also falls into road horror, which is a thing I am also obsessed with. And I love the feeling that once these two women meet and they have a quest, there's a quest. It's reunite the skull with the body, and your wish will be granted. Hopefully, maybe. And then you just have them constantly running up against monsters, both human and otherwise, as they try to do very basic things like find a dry place to sleep and food. And uh, I love how I love the pacing of it. It feels relentless, and yet you make time for these wonderful moments of quiet between these two women. Um, what is your process like for plotting these things out, for pacing them out? Is that something you're very conscious of while you're drafting, or is it something that comes along in the revisions process?
So I don't remember who said this, but there was a writer, I think, who said that writing is very much like driving through the fog. So you have your headlights on so you can see a little bit ahead of you, and that's enough to find your way home. So even if you can't see the whole road, you can see far enough ahead of you to make it there. And I think that's an apt description. So I usually do have an idea for like the bigger plot points. It's not as if I only have an idea for like the next chapter. And I am conscious of I want to say plot beats usually around 25%, something big needs to happen around 50%, about 75%. So I try to pace that properly. Also because readers maybe subconsciously expect something to happen around those marks
Hmm.
within the book. For the rest, I do find pacing difficult. I think most writers find pacing difficult. It's also extremely subjective. So I've had people say, "Oh, this book didn't work for me because it was super slow." I've had people say, "Well, this was really too fast paced," and like anything in between. So it really depends on the reader. So of course, the ideal situation is that the biggest group of readers finds this book well paced. And one thing that was very important for this is because I did plot all these like obstacles and everything, and one thing I had to sort of go over in a second draft is to build in these moments of quiet and I want to say almost lightness, just to make sure the book didn't become this like endless parade of horror and because I didn't want it to feel so relentless that the reader would feel like, wow, this is so bleak and ultimately end up not caring anymore just because it was so relentless. So yeah, I mainly planned out like the events and then I did have to go back in like a later draft to ensure that the pacing was not too relentless.
I want to ask a very specific craft question here because I didn't. It's very funny. I was so absorbed in the story that it I probably wasn't until about halfway through the book that I noticed that else again you said three perspectives and they're all there and they're each chapter is headed with the character name so you know whose head you're in. But Ursula and Otto are third person and Elspeth is first person. What was behind the decision there? Like I have some inkling of it having read the book, but I'm curious what motivated that decision to shift the perspective that way.
I mean, it partially has to do with where everybody ends up in the end, so I can't spoil too much about
Well,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. For the rest, I will say though, sometimes characters do come to you in a certain voice, and I think for Elspeth's voice, like that was very strong and very clearly first person. For the other two, less so. And I know that maybe sounds like silly because, of course, it is something you do put thought in as a writer, but that is the truth. One character just felt like a first person sort of gal, and the other two were like definitely more third person.
I like that answer though because I like when writers chase their instincts in a very sort of immediate way, and Elspeth has that feeling in the book. She does seem like the sort of person who would just kind of take charge of the narrative and say, regardless of what happens later in the book, of being the person who wants to say, no, I'm telling my story. I'm the one who is going to let you know what's going on and what I'm feeling in this moment. And I just loved the voice shift there. I thought it was a wonderful touch. But let's. I don't have a good segue here. I apologize. But you mentioned earlier. Well, here's a segue. You mentioned earlier we were talking about um, the ways in which we as humans deal with the dead, and the way we deal with corpses, and the way we deal with uh, souls and afterlife, and all of that stuff. And that leads us into the story you chose, which is all about that. The Woman in Black, the 2012 film directed by James Watkins, written by Jane Goldman, based on Susan Hill's novel of the same name. This is the second adaptation of the novel. The first was Nigel Neal did a TV movie in I think 1989. Um, Johanna, what do you remember about your first experience with The Woman in Black?
So it came out around the time I was in high school. I was 15, and I actually went to London on a school trip with my classmates. And I remember we had like, I think a whole afternoon to just decide something that we wanted to do. We could spend our time freely, and a lot of us wanted to go see this movie. Only the problem was it was rated 15 and up, and we had a bunch of people who were not 15, were 14. So in the end, we didn't go and see it, and I felt like so deeply disappointed because I really, really wanted to see this movie, but I was also a bit of a chicken, so I would have preferred to watch it with my classmates, so I wouldn't have been alone. So later that year, um, two of my friends actually rented the movie and we ended up watching it with the three of us. And that was funny because one of my friends is like a screamer. So as soon as every time the jump scare happened, she screamed. And so like my other friend and I obviously like even if the jump scare didn't get us the screaming that So that was like genuinely that really heightened the experience for me, I would say. And then we bought the DVD, I believe, after it came out, and then I wanted to watch it with my sisters, and my sisters were interested in it. They don't usually like horror, but I think they kind of were open to it because of Daniel Radcliffe. And they had a friend who did really like horror who also wants to watch it. So the four of us decided to watch it. And my sister is a screamer too. So again, every time the jump scare happened, she'd start screaming to the point that my mom at one point like came down and she was like, "If you don't stop screaming, I'm gonna turn this movie off. Like, stop it." So yeah, that's like like every time I watched this movie, like at least the first few times, there was always somebody like screaming their head off every time something scary happened, and that made it so much scarier.
Watching horror with an audience is so important to so many films, and I love hearing stories of how an audience, however small or large the audience is, impacts the way we receive a scary story. Um, but I want to go back to something interesting you said, because you're one of triplets, correct?
Yes.
So you like horror, but your sisters don't.
No.
What created that divergence? What got you into horror that you think made them maybe shy away from it?
So we were like the three of us were pretty scared as children in general. I think it's partially, I don't know if it's because we were born prematurely and then that's a scary experience when you're a baby and it just
Mm.
primes you for being scared. It may also have been because we were always together, so being alone was super scary. But I remember we were very afraid of the dark until we were around like 8 years old. So until then, we always slept with the light on. We always went places together, even if we had to go to the bathroom. Like we didn't dare go by ourselves. And obviously we grew out of that, but it took a while. Um, but I do remember when I started reading that I wanted to read things that like scared me. I think I could read pretty quickly, and above my grade level very fast. So I was allowed to go to the library. Like my mom took us to the library. And there were a lot of like big books um, that I would check out because they looked cool. They were usually very scary books. And on the one hand, like it would terrify me and I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I'd be super scared. And on the other hand, like I kept coming back to them because they were so exciting. And my sisters never really got that experience from these books. They were just scared and then they wouldn't want to continue on. So I think maybe it's just a difference in character at that point where I was willing to confront that in the safe space of fiction. And I guess I enjoy being scared, or maybe it's because like I was always scared as a child that you sort of learn to deal with that by facing it head on, or like exposing yourself to the scariness in a safe environment. My sisters, I mean, they will read my books. They make the exception for my books. They're okay reading them. They don't like watching horror. And yeah, I recently actually watched Oddity with them because my wife and I had watched it when it came out, and we thought, like, we both remembered it as more as a thriller, and we talked about it, and my sister was like, "Oh my God, that sounds really interesting." So we watched it with them. Oh, my sister's the screamer, obviously screamed
Oh,
again during all the jump scares, and both of them were still kind of mad that we talked them into watching this movie.
Oddity, I can't remember the year it came out off the top of my head, but it had my favorite jump scare of the year in it. The bit where she's going through the camera and she sees the man looking at the camera.
That's the
Uh,
one.
yeah. Oh gosh, popcorn on the ceiling that moment. I can't imagine. So this, I'm relating to a lot of what you're saying, because I was also, I mean, I'm a scared adult, but I was also a very scared child. Um, and I do wonder if the feeling of aloneness has something to do with it, because I'm the oldest. My siblings didn't come along. My first sister is 4 years younger than I am, and I had cousins around me, but they were all a little older. So there were certain things that were just like, oh, Matthew's not involved in this. This is big kid stuff. And so there was an element of like, I'm just kind of the only kid here in my own little world. And also my father, who was only wanted the best for me and only wanted me to be happy and safe and healthy, but he was very protective and very concerned with things that would scare me. So when I was a kid, it was always like, well, you don't know, Matthew, you don't want to watch that. That will scare you. That will make you uncomfortable. And every time something would sort of leak through that would scare me, it would scare me and I would stay up, but I would be fascinated by it. And I would want to keep going back and figuring out like what happened there. Why did that do that to me? Um, so setting aside the audience response that you received from watching The Woman in Black with your friends and your sisters, uh, what what kept you going back to it? What made it your choice for the podcast?
Well, it terrified me, like absolutely terrifying movie. I couldn't sleep after, and I kept replaying certain scenes in my mind. So there's the scene where after they basically excavated the body and
Oh
they've
yeah.
left it in the room, right? And then you see her standing at the end of the hallway. She comes closer, and like the light goes off. Like, oh, that was so terrifying. I still think it's very, very terrifying. And I think what was interesting because so when I was around 15, like a little before that, I think when I was around 13 is when I started watching horror movies with friends. Because again, like my sisters definitely didn't want to watch any of that with me, and they would always like terrify me a lot. And then the more you watch, I think the more exposed you are, the less difficult, like the less easily frightened you are. But then I would rewatch The Woman in Black, and that still terrifies me. And I think
Mm,
it's interesting because so many of the other movies that I found deeply, deeply disturbing or scary when I was a teen no longer hold that power. But
mhm.
this one does, and I've rewatched it several times because every time I'm like, okay, surely this time it's not as scary, but it keeps being that scary.
So let's kind of get into the nuts and bolts of this. And for everyone listening, we're going to spoil this movie. It came out in 2012. If you haven't seen it and you don't want to be spoiled, it's streaming places. So pause the podcast and go watch it if you want to. Um, but it is the setup is classic English ghost story. It's a solicitor, a lawyer. It's set in 1889, so we're in the Victorian era here. Um, and Daniel Radcliffe plays this young lawyer named Arthur who is has fallen on hard times. His wife died in childbirth. It's been I think 4 years or 5 years. I don't remember how old his son is, but he has a son. Um, and he has just had a hard time since his wife died, and his boss basically tells him like, if you don't get your act together, I have to fire you. And the way you're going to get your act together is you're going to go to this remote town and deal with this old widowed woman's estate. There's this house with the very lovely name of Eel Marsh House, which is one of my favorite haunted house names of all time. And go to Ilmarsh House, go through all this woman's paperwork, get her estate sorted out, get the house sold, and you're back in my good graces. So he goes, and immediately everyone in town is like, don't go to that house. To the point that the guy who he's supposed to meet, who's supposed to show him all the information about the house, just hands him the paperwork like at the door of the inn and says like, this is everything you need. Don't go to the house. And Arthur, wanting to do a good job, is like, no, I have to go to the house. I have to. My boss is counting on me to do this right. I have to go through all this paperwork. And he goes to the house. He starts hearing weird noises and seeing weird things. And then children in the town start dying. And that is when we learn that there is a vengeful spirit in Eelmarsh House whose child was taken from her and then died in a carriage accident. Uh, and talking it through like that, it sounds very basic. Set him up, knock him down, ghost story. You feel like you know where it's going, but the craft involved. I know there are people who don't like this movie in the horror world, but I find it to be very evocative and very very effective. So you have this expertise in early modern literature. I would imagine you've read your share of English ghost stories. What about The Woman in Black structurally as a narrative like sets it apart for you from a craft standpoint? Like we've talked about how scary it makes you from an emotional standpoint, but what about the way it's put together appeals to you?
So I think because you have the book and you have the movie, and they do differ in certain respects. The book I would say is more quintessentially English ghost story.
Oh
In
yeah.
that one, because in the book version, like Arthur, the main character, the lawyer, is it's during Christmas and he has remarried. We know he has a second wife and she had children from her first marriage. These children are all fully grown. this being Christmas, this being England, they are telling ghost stories. And at one point, they ask Arthur what is the scariest thing he's ever been through, and it's something that's so horrific that he can't talk about it. So he decides to write it down for his family so they can understand what happened to him. And like you said, like it is I want to say almost a basic ghost story. We have like the weird town, the villagers who are very off-putting, the scary house, the weird stuff, like everything that goes bump in the night. What I would say is interesting is that every time this woman in black is sighted, a child will die, and usually it's not like, oh, a child suddenly gets a heart attack or there's an accident, as in like a child is crushed by a boulder or something. These children actively kill themselves in very, very gruesome ways.
Yes.
And that's a thing that they like mention, like it's the woman in black makes them do it. So in the movie, like the opening scene is literally three children who throw themselves out of a window. There's a scene where a child sets herself on fire. So very gruesome stuff. And I would say what is interesting there is that usually it's a bit of an unspoken rule within ghost stories and horror in general, I want to say up until quite recently, they leave children alone. Like you try not to kill them. So for example, with Stephen King's It, I think that's why It was so scary and effective because we immediately get like little Georgie's arm ripped off and this poor kid dies. And that's very shocking because we don't expect it. From a craft point of view, I would say, so that's an interesting thing, interesting element about it. I wouldn't say it necessarily breaks a rule, but it is at least the path less often taken. But it is a traditional ghost story, but it is a traditional ghost story done so well that it's still very riveting. Even if you already know the story like I have, because I've
Yeah.
watched it several times, it continues to be scary. There's something very unsettling about it. Like the setup is really, really good. I think it also just depends, I guess, on what you personally find scary. I find stuff like this scary, the supernatural, so it obviously is always gonna get me. But I think what is really good here is that you get a really good setup and a really good payoff. Like this movie sets everything up so perfectly and then manages to tie it all together in a very pleasing way. So we like all these elements are revealed to us quite slowly. What I would say is also pretty interesting because I rewatched this movie with my mom actually last weekend to prepare for this podcast. And my mom was like, "Well, this guy ain't scared of anything, is he?" Because he just keeps going. Like as a protagonist, I would say Arthur is very interesting because he just really faces down his fears.
He does, and it's there are a couple of reasons for that I think make him a really interesting character. One is obviously his boss told him like you have to get this done. If you don't get this done, I'm not going to be able to keep you employed here because you're not of any use to me and I'm not running a charity. So he's that's part of it is just like I have to do this because the bills are piling up and he has to provide for his son. But the other interesting thing the film does is it gives us a ticking clock where at the beginning of the film we see Arthur leaving London to go out to this town and his sweet little son who I have a 3.5-year-old son right now. So this movie was a little harder to watch for me this time than it was the first time I saw it. But that's another story. But his son has made this drawing and because the plan is he's going to go to this town on Tuesday. He's going to do his work throughout the week. And then at the weekend, his son and his son's nanny are going to join him in town and they're going to have a little weekend away. And so his son has done this drawing for him where Tuesday, it's a sad drawing of him waving goodbye to daddy. Friday is a happy drawing of them meeting again at the train station. And so we know he's got 3 days of work. Then he gets to see his son. And at first, that's what he's working toward. He's like, I'm going to make my family proud. I'm going to take care of my kid. It's great. And then once he puts together that the woman in black is connected to children's deaths, then it becomes, oh no, my son is coming on Friday. I have to find a way to make this stop or like my own family will be in danger because he's watching throughout. Like you mentioned like one of the girls walks into one of the kids who dies walks into the police station and her brothers say she drank lye. And the next thing that happens is she vomits up blood and she's dead. And he has to witness this stuff. He goes into a burning building to try to save one child and watches her immolate herself with a lantern. so he's seeing all these kids dying and going like, oh no, I have to fix this, or like my kid is going to die. And so I think that all factors into Arthur. I also think that just Daniel Radcliffe being Daniel Radcliffe in 2012, I think it was brilliant casting. And this was that era when Radcliffe was starting to break away from Harry Potter. And I don't know if Harry Potter was done yet at this point. I can't
I
remember when
think it
the
was his
last.
first part after the franchise ended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was trying to set himself apart and go, I can do other things. And obviously he's done a lot of interesting stuff since, but one that was really interesting was he was doing this horror film that was also sort of heralded as the return of Hammer horror. Like the rights holders of the Hammer name now were a producer on it, so it was a Hammer movie, and it has all those like cobwebby old rooms that are Hammer hallmarks in it. But having him in the role, he's just so earnest. He has one of those faces you want to root for him. You want him to be okay. And like you said, it's very funny. It's I don't think this film gets credit for being funny because it is so bleak in so many places, but it is for most of the runtime just a story about a guy who is trying to get paperwork done. He,
You think about it like that too. Yeah. I mean, I will say like what adds to the whole character motivation is of course that he does in some way feel responsible for these children's deaths.
yes,
Because I mean the villagers blame him because they say, well, you woke it up because every time we see this woman in black, a child will die. And it doesn't matter who sees her, it doesn't matter like for how like long they see her, but as soon as you see her, someone will die. So they also believe that he's responsible for this whole situation because if he hadn't gone over to the stupid house, nobody would have seen her. And I think that is an interesting deviation from the book because if you read the book, he sees the woman in black during the funeral and he doesn't realize she's a ghost. Like he thinks he does see something's clearly wrong with her, but he thinks she's suffering from some kind of horrible wasting disease. So he's like, oh, this is just a like a very like sick woman. And that is interesting because then later she keeps popping up. It's like, oh my God, this is a ghost. But initially, he doesn't even realize he's witnessing anything supernatural. And I think that is, I mean, I understand why they didn't keep that in the movie. But I do think that's an interesting thing because within the movie, too, you have characters who refuse to believe that they're witnessing something supernatural, even when it's very clearly supernatural.
yeah, that's another interesting wrinkle in here is Kieran Hines plays this guy named Sam Daly who Arthur meets on the train out to the town, and Sam is the wealthiest person in town now that this old woman in Eelmarsh House has died. They are the wealthy people, and we know that because he is the first person in the village to own a car because it's 1889 and he has purchased a motor coach and no one else has yet. Uh, and Sam is interesting because he is a victim of the woman in black. He had a son, Nicholas, who passed away in a drowning accident, what was thought to be an accident. And he and his wife are very in their grief. And he is very much the upstanding English gentleman of like, oh, yes, yes, our son died. And he goes to the tomb every night and says goodnight to him or whatever. But his wife has poured on the coping mechanisms and has basically gone crazy to the point that she has two small dogs that she keeps as children, to the point that they have high chairs and she feeds them at the dinner table and she rocks them to sleep in bassinets at night. But Sam is so steadfast in like, nothing's happening here. All these people are just superstitious weirdos. Believe me, I know. I've lived around them my whole life. Sometimes tragedy happens, which leads us into the other really interesting thing about this story, and I think it's really interesting in the context of Bone of My Bone in particular, which is this is Victorian England, which means the spiritualism craze is rampant. Everyone is talking about our spirits real? Can you talk to the dead? Do the dead visit us after they die? When Arthur is on the train, he's looking at a newspaper ad for I can't remember if it's a spirit photographer or a medium or something like that, but it's someone who is endorsed by Arthur Conan Doyle, who was lost a son in in war and was very very into spiritualism.
Very
Um,
credulous, yeah.
yeah, just extremely like would give lectures and put pictures up and say this is proof of ghosts, and it was just this very clearly cut and paste ghost image. That's a whole other can of worms, though. But because he has lost his wife, Arthur is starting to sort of tip into that world of, wouldn't it be great if I could see my wife again? Wouldn't it be great if I could talk to her? Wouldn't it be great if this was all real and there was a way to contact her? So he's sort of primed to see a ghost. And I do
He
like to,
is, yeah.
yeah, I do like to give him a little bit of credit because the first time he sees the woman in black, she's standing by the little graveyard on the grounds of Eelmarsh House, and he sees her out the window, and he's just like, "Oh, there's a woman here. How'd she get here?" And then he mentions it to someone else because Eelmarsh House is a tidal island, by the way. I didn't mention that to listeners, which is an amazing visual. There's a causeway uh, that I wonder if 28 years later got that idea from the woman in
Yeah,
black,
that's what
actually.
we meant. My wife and I mentioned that. We were like, ah.
Because it is, it's the tide comes in and covers the causeway, so you can't get out to the house, so you have to go out when the tide is out. So that means apart from this little narrow causeway, everything around it is marsh and bog, which explains why the child died in the carriage accident. So it's this amazing setting where he's just like, there was a woman out here, there's not supposed to be anyone out here, and everyone is just immediately like, oh no, he did the thing that we knew he would do. And these people are reacting to him with just absolute savagery. They're just like, you have to get out of here. What are you doing? And he's just constantly going like, well, what do you mean? I just have paperwork. I don't know
Yeah, and
that
that
the
makes me wonder if they'd actually told him what was going on, because he was primed to believe in the supernatural. Would he have just gone? Because like these people keep telling him like, "Hey, you really, really need to go because it's super important that you leave," but they refuse to tell him
yeah.
why they believe that, and that, of course, also makes it kind of difficult for him to sort of understand like why are these people so super hostile? Are they just, they don't they like strangers? Do they just have a personal vendetta, I guess, against this old widow who passed away? Like, what is going on?
Yeah. And it's that is so interesting because there are ghost stories where a guy will show up at the tavern in the town and they'll just flat out say like, oh, that place is haunted. There's a ghost of an old woman there, and the legend goes that if you see her, a child will die. And that gives the protagonist the opportunity to go, oh, that's nonsense, and then go out and say, but they don't do that. They just say like, you should go. And he's like, what do you mean I should go? You should go. You should just go. Get back on the train, go. Um, to the point, and it even has that great almost Dracula-esque moment where he wants to go out to the house and no one will take him, so he has to bribe the carriage driver that was supposed to take him to the train station and say, take me here instead. And he's like, all right, well, it's going to cost you. And the guy pulls up to the edge of it and is like, all right, this is as far as I go. And he's like, well, come back and get me. And he's like, well, I can't get you because the tide is coming, but I'll be back at 5. um, and then by the end, because he just wants to figure out what's going on, he's just out there all night because no one will come get him. He's just, I'll work through. It's fine. Um, so I was talking about the connection I felt to Bone of My Bone while watching this, and I watched it again last night. Um, your book and this film are both intensely preoccupied with the way in which we view death. um which I mean, you said yourself like that's a preoccupation in all of your work, but it's all through the woman in black. um in that, like, death is all around these people and none of them really want to talk about it because they don't want to relive these awful tragedies that have plagued this town. And at the same time, there's this spiritualist movement going on where everyone involved in that wants to talk about the tragedies of their lives and who they lost and why they lost them and how they can get them back. And in without going into too many spoilery details, in your book you have one character who is very firm in her belief of like, this is what happens when we die. I know because I have studied this and the Bible tells me this is how this works. And you have another character who's like, oh no, there are revenants all over the place. Like the dead, it's way more complicated than just being alive and being dead. There are all different states in between, and I'll tell you all about this folklore. Is this the movie? Is this the story you think that set off your preoccupation with how we process death and grieving and the afterlife?
I think so. It's definitely the first like adult Gothic movie I saw. I'm trying to think like I did watch other horror movies before that, but like like the original TV miniseries, and I
Mhm.
watched a bunch of slashers. Um, but yeah, those never really spoke to me the same way as this movie did, and I think that's also because I really, really, really enjoy Gothic stuff in general. I really like the preoccupation it has with like secrets of the past coming to the forefront. The aesthetic, I will say, like I love a good aesthetic. But yeah, that preoccupation with death, I think in this movie is super prevalent, and that is something that I personally find super interesting. So I don't know if this movie awakened that in me or whether it was already there and that's why it spoke to me so much. It's kind of a chicken and an egg situation, I think. But it definitely nowadays I would say when I rewatch it, it's like it definitely spoke to me on that like level where we have the this tug and pull between what is real and what isn't, like afterlife, yes or no. Is it even as clean cut as we like to think it is? Is it far more nuanced or complicated? And that is something I also enjoy putting in my horror because I think if you make it super clear cut, like yes, there's something definitely. I mean, this book is pretty clear in that there is supernatural stuff going on, so that is not the main question of the book. It was in my previous two novels where there's this whole thing like, is this reality? Is this madness? This book is far more preoccupied with the whole religious aspect, like is there a god, yes or no, and if so, like which which ones of these Christian groups is right in like the very specific ways in which they construct their religion. And I don't have any answers for that, honestly. I mean, I think if we did, obviously, we wouldn't still be having all these religious debates. But I do think it's a very interesting question to at least address within fiction, and then specifically the very old dilemma, like if God is all powerful and all good, then why does evil exist?
Well, and you also, as you were talking, I was thinking about you quote Milton's Paradise Lost throughout Bone of My Bone, and the book is broken up into several parts, and you see each part has a Paradise Lost quote, and there's the famous quote which I would butcher, so I'm just going to paraphrase. The quote of each person in their own mind can make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven. Um, and one of the things that we were talking about the ways that the woman in black seems like a basic ghost story and then starts to hit into all these different complexities, and I think that one of the complexities is we start to think of Arthur, and some of this is the performance. It's not ever overtly stated, but it's in the way he's filmed. It's in the way that Daniel Radcliffe has this pallor to him, and he's only ever wearing black and white. There is no color in his wardrobe at all. The only color on his body are his eyes because he has those striking blue eyes. Um, he is living in this sort of hell of his own making. He is very much um, so preoccupied with loss and with trying to regain some semblance of the life he wanted that he has sort of become a ghost unto himself, which I think is also a very common Gothic theme. The idea of like this sort of lost person going and finding all these secrets in a house. Um, and that's true of Bone of My Bone as well. These are lost people trying to find they're trying to reclaim something. They're trying to use the secrets of the past to get something back that they lost. Um, and I just find those connections so interesting that I just wanted to speak it out loud. But I also want to ask you, just point blank, do you believe in ghosts?
So I've never really had any paranormal experiences, and I think that's kind of sad because I think it would be so very, very fascinating. On the other hand, like I don't know if I want to. I know some paranormal experiences can be very soothing, very, very pleasant. Others can be absolutely terrifying. I don't know if I'm ready for that. Um, But I will say, like, I think it also depends on what we mean when we say a ghost. I am a firm believer because obviously with science, we haven't discovered everything there is to know. And it might very well be that these paranormal experiences that people report have very plausible scientific explanations. And we're all gonna, like, I don't know, in a few centuries, we're gonna look back and think, wow, insane that people ever believed in ghosts. At the same time, maybe there is something. Like just because I haven't personally experienced it doesn't mean I don't believe other people have. You know, like I can understand that Korean is a language that lots of people speak without being able to speak it myself. So I'm a, like keep my options open and say like I don't really think they exist, but I'm open to the possibility.
I have this interesting situation in my family where my sister, my youngest sister, now lives in my grandparents' house. They passed away a few years ago, and she lives in their house. And as after they passed, and we were working on clearing out the house and getting it ready uh for them, for my sister to live in it, it was she kept seeing ghosts in the house. She kept talking about this house is haunted. It's haunted. I've seen things, I've heard things. It's haunted. It's haunted. I have been to that house so many times and have never seen anything, and it frustrates me so much because I really would love to say, yeah, I've seen something. I've experienced something, and I just I'm not quite there, but I'm with you. I'm like I would love to be proven. I would not proven wrong, but I would love to see something. I think that that would not only be a thing that I would talk about for the rest of my life, but I think it would be a I don't know what it would be because I haven't experienced it yet. But I'm jealous that other people have, you know. Um let's talk a little bit about the ending because one of the things I love about this movie is it goes for the throat with the ending. When it could have been, and this is another one of those variations on the classic ghost story because they do Arthur does everything right. He goes and does the research, which I love. A scene, any scene in a gothic story where the main character has to do research and look through old papers to determine the truth. I'm there. I love it. He finds out like, oh, the woman in black is this unmarried woman who had a son, and because she was unmarried, her wealthy landed sister forced her to give up the child so that the sister could have a child. And then the kid died in this carriage accident. And the her name is Jeanette, the woman in black. Her name is Jeanette, and she blames her sister for her son's death, and so has become and committed suicide in the house and has become this vengeful ghost. And he learns all of this, and he's like, well, obviously the kid never got a proper burial because he sank in the bog. We have to go get the kid's body, give him a proper burial, reunite him with his mother. We'll put the restless spirit to rest. It will be great. We'll fix it. I'm going to take care of this. And he does. He does all of it. He goes out in the bog in a harrowing, like, bogs terrify me. The idea that you would just get stuck and trapped in that and not be able to do anything about it. So there's an amazing scene where they pull the kid's body out of the bog. And as you said, they bring him into the house, clean him up, wrap him in a shroud so he looks a little more dignified, and leave him there for his mother to find. And then there's that great scene where she comes up the hallway and is screaming as she runs to her dead son. And then they bury him. They bury them together. They put the corpses together in a single grave. And he's like, I did it. I fixed it. And then he goes to the train station to meet his son. And he sees the woman in black. And next thing you know, his son is walking down the train tracks. He leaps down, grabs his son. They're both hit by the train. So it's a very bleak ending because the curse has not been lifted. The woman in black is still a vengeful spirit despite being reunited with her son's body. But the happy part is that Arthur and his son get to see their wife/mother again in the afterlife. So I guess he finds proof of the afterlife. So that's happy. But for the land of the living, the woman in black is still out there, still doing things. Um, it's a bit different from the way the book ends and from the way the TV movie ends. But how do you feel about the ending to the 2012 film?
So I know it's a controversial ending. I know some people hate it. I know some people love it. I find it interesting in that, like you said, right? You think, okay, we've done it. We've defeated the evil. She's being reunited with her son because we know like Janet is a vengeful bitch when you really get
Yes,
down to it. Because the whole point, what we see during the research scene too, is that she keeps writing, like she tries to send her son birthday cards and gifts and everything, and her sister basically had, I think her, is it Janet or Jeanette? Well,
it's
doesn't matter.
Jeanette. It's Jeanette, I
Jeanette.
believe. Yeah,
So like Jeanette, she has basically had her sister Jeanette deemed mentally unwell. So
yeah.
that's why this woman can't even take care of her own son. She then basically keeps her from seeing her own son, and her sister, like Jeanette, technically like writes her a letter basically saying like, "Hey, this is really super uncool of you, but also it's not gonna work because I am always gonna find a way to see my son no matter what." And then obviously the son dies, and Jeanette, the vengeful bitch, goes over to the house and kills herself in the nursery. This woman who's not been over in like 8 years because she was not allowed to be there, like finds a way to get there and kill herself on the grounds. And I think so in that sense, I guess you already had the like an inkling, and I mean that she starts killing a bunch of kids because if she can't have her son, I guess other people are not allowed to have their own children around. So this woman is a very, very angry, like nasty ghost, I want to say. At the same time, you understand where she's coming from. It's a bit extreme. So there were already these signs, I think, that she was not gonna stop after she was reunited with her son because that like anger sort of festered over all these years. And at the same time, I think the movie, I don't like, I find it difficult to interpret this ending because on the one hand, it's super bleak because yes, we did everything right and still this woman won't stop. And the main character, especially like because he starts out as this what the kids say like a sad little meow meow of a man, like this ghost of like he even his son when he draws pictures he always draws his dad with a super sad face and he's like, oh, why am I looking sad? And the child's like, well, that's just your face, that's what you look like. So we already get the sense like this guy's always super super sad, and at the same time throughout the movie not only does he get the confirmation that yes, the afterlife is real because he has at times felt the presence of his wife, so he's sort of confirmed, I guess, in that belief that hey, maybe his wife is with him. We also see him sort of overcome that um, state of grief he is stuck in. I think precisely because he is confronted with all these people in this village who are completely stuck in their grief. So he's confronted with that, I think, with his friend Sam and Sam's wife, who, by the way, is psychic, who has a connection to her dead son, which Sam continuously denies and tries to drug
Yes.
his wife. Like, because he's like, oh, she's having another episode where his poor wife is literally trying to warn people, like, hey, the woman in black's coming. But what is interesting there is, like, Sam at one point tells Arthur about like, hey, I had a son, Nicholas, who passed away, and he would have been your age. And like we've seen the wife being very like ill-equipped to deal with this grief because she has those two little dogs. She basically acts as if they're children. But at the same time, Sam is not very much better off either because again, this child died like what 20 years ago, and
Yeah.
yet they're still stuck in this situation where they can't let go and they can't like move past. And that is true for all these people in this village. Like we have the scene with the innkeeper, which I think is a very underrated scene, and I think it might not be immediately obvious, at least it wasn't to me the first time I watched it, where
Right.
everybody is trying to get Arthur out because they're basically telling him, hey, there's no room at the inn, bye bye, like there's another train going, you should leave. And then the innkeeper's wife is sort of like, well, okay, but surely we can find like a place for him because it's super late. The weather is really bad. I feel bad like turning this guy out. And then her husband's like, well, there's no room unless you want to put him in the attic. And the attic is the room where her three children like had their playroom. They slept there, and that's where they like leapt to their deaths.
Yeah,
So
that's where
that's
the prologue of the movie takes place. Yeah.
right. So that's when you think about it, it's kind of fucking cruel of this man to be like, okay, if you want to keep this man so badly, you have to put him in this room that I think he's very clear. Like they don't really step foot in that room. They haven't cleaned up after what happened there, and so they put him in there. So poor Arthur has to deal with this very creepy room with like a bunch of dolls that are beheaded and everything. But like, and there's a little bird there that constantly like mimics the sound of weeping, which suggests that it's recently heard this woman cry. So, like, yeah, he's confronted with all these people who are horribly stuck in this situation of grief. And I think that is one of the things that propels him to make a change. I mean, he was already on his way out, right? Because he was willing to take this job to do better, to be a better father, a more present father for his son. And I think what we see throughout the movie is him getting there. Like, he has sort of, I want to say, not conquered his grief, but he's seen what happens if he doesn't move past his grief and what it will do to him and his relationship with his son. So he's ready to like move at least like to incorporate that grief in a healthier way in his life. He's ready to like spend a nice time with his son. And then they both get smashed to smithereens by a train. That sucks. And then for them, like the movie to sort of be like, oh, but it's okay because like they meet like there's a happy ending because they're reunited with their like wife slash mom. I don't know. Is that a cop out? I'm still unsure.
I don't know. It's interesting because in the book, it like you said, his wife. Well, his wife doesn't die before the events of the novel. Basically, she it's him telling the story of how he sighted this mysterious woman in black, and then his wife and son eventually died, and now he's remarried. And then in the '89 adaptation, his wife and son are both alive when the story starts, and they survive to the end, and then all three of them die at once in the same accident. So it's a bummer no matter which way you slice it. um I don't know that it's a cop out because it reminds me of the others, the Nicole Kidman film The Others, which has a similar sort of it's more of a twist. This is less of a, this is not really a twist. It's just, I guess the twist is that they didn't beat the woman in black, but the death is not a twist. It's just kind of the reveal at the end. um I do like the idea that you have to sort of wonder, because of everything you just described, has he found has he actually found some kind of freedom in the afterlife, some kind of happiness, or is this all a mirage that will fade for him over time? And the movie doesn't ever answer that, which I think is sort of in keeping with the weird position that spiritualism had in the public consciousness at the time. Um, there are so many great books about the rise of spiritualism and the grip it had over post Civil War America, and also Victorian England. I love the ambiguity of it. I love that we kind of don't really get to know if it's actually a happy ending or not. Like obviously it's not a happy ending for everyone in town, but I do wonder, like I really can't tell you whether Arthur is okay, and I kind of like that about it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I will say like an ambiguous ending does linger the longest because if it was very clear cut, this movie would have less staying power. I also think it's interesting because, for example, Sam and his wife, like his wife is a spiritualist, believes, and I mean, there's a lot of evidence in the book that in the movie, I mean, that she's right, that she has a spiritual connection with her dead son, and her dead son like tells her things. At the same time, Sam is like, oh no, this is all like rubbish. This is a stupid accident. Like there's no woman in black. And he says to Arthur, like, I believe like in God, and I believe that after like I die, I'm reunited with my son. And I guess like both of them are right in this scenario because Arthur is reunited with his wife after death, but Sam's wife is also correct to say like, hey, I can't talk to dead people because sometimes dead people haunt us because that's a thing. And it's silly to act like that's untrue. So I think in that sense it is again what we've already like pointed out. It is a traditional ghost story in its setup, but then it has all these really interesting layers and details that really reward rewatching this movie and make it very interesting to discuss.
Yeah. I rewatched it last night, and now I'm going to go rewatch it again because you pointed out, I don't remember if it was my second or third time watching this, but it was still very early. You pointed out things in our conversation that I didn't even pick up on last night, so I already want to go watch it again. Um, but everyone out there, go watch The Woman in Black. Watch it again. Watch it for the first time. Also, go pick up Bone of My Bone, available now from Poison Pen Press. Johanna, it has been lovely talking with you. Before we let you go, will you please let everyone know where they can find you online?
So I am on TikTok and Instagram. If you just look for Johanna van Veen or Johanna van Veen, either way works. You are bound to find me.
Our guest has been Johanna van Veen. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was so great talking to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I had a really good time.
Thanks once again to Johanna van Veen for being on the show. It was great talking with her. Bone of My Bone is out now. Pick it up. Pick her other books up. She's great. Go follow her on her various social accounts so you can keep track of everything she's doing and find out when we're going to get another Johanna van Veen book. I would very much like that as soon as possible. And if you want to keep track of everything that we have going on, the easiest way to do that is to follow us on Blue Sky. We are at scareshapedus.bsky.social over there. That is where you will find every episode of the show, new guest announcements whenever we have those, updates on what we're watching or reading in preparation for the show, all kinds of stuff like that. You can also find us on Facebook under The Scares That Shaped Us, and we are The Scares That Shaped Us on YouTube as well. If you prefer to get your podcasts on YouTube, head over there and like and subscribe. And of course, if you like the show, please tell your friends, let everybody know about all the cool stuff we're doing over here. And if you are so inclined, head to the podcasting platform of your choice and leave us the best review you can on that platform's rating system. That helps us so much to get featured various places and helps us to grow our audience, which we really appreciate. That is it for me this week. We will be back with another brand new episode next week, June 24th at noon Central, as always. Can't say who the guest is just yet, but if you follow us on Blue Sky, you will know, hopefully very, very soon, if you're listening to this, the day it goes up. But until next time, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. I'm Matthew Jackson, and this is The Scares That Shaped Us.